Before I start, I'd like to do a shout out to my good subscriber Moo Hunter, who got in touch and requested this story, so thank you. This one's for you. Hello, this story is a picture of life in the East Riding as drawn from details in the Old Norse sagas, and it's not as twee as it sounds. I hope you enjoy it. The year is 892. 25 years before this date, a heathen army had crossed the Humber on their march to York, and a good number of broken heads and hewn-off limbs had been the result of their visit to the province of Deira. Then, like all sensible people, the invaders and the invaded had come to terms. Villages of the Angles were not too numerous in the district. At any rate, there was plenty of unoccupied land lying around them, and this was just what the invaders wanted, for their brothers and sisters had grown so numerous in the lands across the sea that those who had left their homes had no great desire to go back to them. Among the band of heathen Northmen had been a jarl named Anlaf, and between Anlaf and the ealdorman at Beverley it had been agreed that the former should choose land whereupon to settle his men somewhere in the 4 miles of unoccupied country lying between Hessel and Cottingham. His men were allowed to choose wives from amongst the maidens of these 2 villages, or the neighbouring ones of Wheaton and Ripplingham. In return, the Northmen would give their attention to clearing and tilling the land they had chosen, and to conduct themselves as far as reasonably could be expected in a manner harmless to the people of all surrounding villages. Such had been the beginnings of Anlafsbyr. The land for settlement was chosen, nice dry land on rising ground with a natural drainage to the river. Rough shelters for the men were first made, and the ground was then marked out for the building of Anlaf's Hall. 3 times was the ground measured for this, and each time after the first the measurements proved slightly larger than the previous ones. I hope this means that they changed their plan as they went along and not used the same measurements and got 3 different results. Anyway, they decided that this boded good luck, and the work was therefore entered upon with spirit. In the course of time the building of the hall was finished. Then came the rewards for Anlaf's men for their labours. The surrounding land was marked out and divided up. Each carl received a portion, large or small in accordance with his own worth, and a considerable portion was left over to belong to all the carls in common. The thralls, of course, got no land. They did not count as men, but as cattle. Probably some of them were exchanged with the carls of Hessel for 4-legged cattle. In 3 years' time, Anlafsbyr was a thriving settlement. The omens had promised good luck, and the good luck came. Meanwhile, Kettle, the son of Anlaf, chose himself a wife from Ripplingham. So did others for themselves, and some not finding the looks of the maidens of Hessel and Beverley and Wheaton and Ripplingham to their liking, went farther afield, and made raids on the villages of Hotham and Sancton, only to retire with several cracked heads and broken arms for their pains. But this was an exception to the general rule. In most cases, the Anglian maidens were quite willing to wed the handsome strangers, even if their language was at first difficult to understand, and their methods of wooing somewhat rough and unpolished. In fact, they rather approved of the roughness than disapproved of it, and to be singled out for one's good looks and carried off by one of those bold Northmen was something for a maiden to be proud of. It's not terribly modern, is it? It's an old book, please forgive it. The result of the frequent marriages between the Northmen and the Angles quickly became apparent. Husband and wife spoke different languages sufficiently alike for one to make out the other's meaning in most cases, but the children were quite naturally brought up to speak the tongue of their mother, and not that of their father, so that as time went on the language of the Northmen disappeared, or rather became merged in the language of the Angles. Thus, although Anlaf and his carls spoke the Norse tongue, their grandchildren spoke the English, but for all that, they lived in the Danelaw, where Danish customs and Danish laws were observed. When Anlaf died in 871, Kettle Anlafsson began to rule his father's settlement. His 2 sons, Ulf and Raf, went as custom decreed they ought to go on Viking raids as soon as they reached their manly age of 15 or 16. 4 years of these raids sufficed to prove the prowess of Ulf Ketilsson, and his right eventually to succeed his father as Jarl. Then he settled down to help his father, who had become a man past middle age, but Raf, his brother, continued at sea. In 890, Kettle Anlafsson died, and his son Ulf was proclaimed Jarl. Raf was then away, but now in the spring of 892 he has just returned, to be honoured by all men as the first among them to make the perilous voyage to an island lying far to the northwest, whose name was spoken of as Iceland. Great therefore are the rejoicings at Anlafsbyr. Jarl Ulf has ridden full speed to the river shore on hearing that 3 ships have been sighted coming up the river with red, blue and green sails like those of his brother's ships. Before he leaves home, he has given instruction to his wife Helga that the hall is to be ready for a great feast in case the ships are his brothers. A messenger has quickly brought back the good tidings, and preparations are being pushed on rapidly, that the welcome Raff and his men receive shall be one fitting to the occasion. Outside the hall in Anlafsbyr, there is a great noise of shouting and the trampling of horses and of men. Raff Ketilsson has arrived with his men, and welcome is being given by Jarl Ulf and his wife Helga Eriksson. It is not yet time for the meal now being prepared, and Raff decides that he is not hungry one little bit, so sports are hastily arranged on the green in the front of the hall. There shall be a great horse fight, for 2 of Ulf's carls have horses that have been thoroughly trained to fight, and neither of them has yet been beaten. The horse fight takes place accordingly. Each carl makes his horse rise on his hind legs and attack the other, biting it wherever it can. As the contest goes on, the horses get enraged and their masters incite them by blows on their hind quarters. Finally, one of the horses gives in and runs away, leaving the other victor. Then there is the running contest. Raff the Viking has among his troop a man from Ireland named Gilly, whom he wagers to be any horse in speed. A dozen horses are immediately offered, and the best of them, a horse belonging to a carl named Rolf, is chosen. Gilly will race Rolf's horse, and if the horse wins, its owner shall have a gold ring given to him by Raff. For half a mile they race along, Gilly being all the while at the horse's shoulder, and the result being therefore a dead heat. "But," says Rolf, "you had hold of the strap on my saddle girth, and my horse pulled you along." Then replies Gilly, "We'll have it over again." This time Gilly starts a yard in front of the horse, and at the end of the half mile he is still the same distance in front. "Did I this time take hold of your saddle girth?" asks Gilly. "No," is Rolf's answer, "but my horse had no chance. You were just in front of him all the way, and I was afraid of riding you down." "Very well," says Gilly, "we will have the race over again." So for the 3rd time they race, and this time the horse is given 20-yard start, but Gilly catches Rolf up, passes him, stands still till the horse is again in front, and then starts again and finishes 10 yards in front. There is tremendous cheering, and Jarl Ulf gives Gilly a gold ring in weight of equal to that offered by his brother to the horse's owner. Next, a game of ball. Sides are chosen, and a hard wooden ball and 2 wooden bats are brought forth. The bats are given to 1 man on each side. The ball is thrown up in the air, and one of the batsmen hits it with all his force in the direction of the other. The second batsman tries to hit it back and not let it pass him, but before he can hit it, he is pulled down by the men on the other side. So the game goes on. It's by no means a gentle game, for the occasion is a special one, and all the players are on their mettle. When time is called and bruises and wounds are reckoned up, it is found that the players have sustained 3 broken arms, a broken thigh bone, and the loss of 1 eye. Lesser injuries seem to go uncounted. By this time the feast is ready, and so are the men. If good appetites are any indication of good health, the uninjured men are all in a state of very rigorous health. Jarl Ulf Ketilsson leads the way to his high seat, and Raff the Viking is shown to his high seat opposite. Swords, shields and axes are hung on the nails driven up to the walls above the side benches. By the side of Ulf sits his wife Helga. The scene is one of varied colour, the blue, red, green, scarlet and purple kirtles of the freemen contrasting strongly with the white garments of the thralls who serve the food. Huge joints of beef and pork are brought in from the kitchens, and there are numerous calls for the former, for there have been little or no fresh meat since the beginning of last November, and men's stomachs have a way of getting tired of salted pig when they have been fed on it for 5 months without a break. Plates are of wood, fingers serve for fork, and each man cuts off with his knife dagger the amount of meat and bread that he feels himself capable of eating. Ale is served to the Jarl and his family in bullock's horns, adorned with gold and silver bands, to the others in wooden drinking cups. Halfway through the feast, Helga leaves her seat, fills a horn with wine and offers it to Raff. The Viking drains it at a draught. Then there is a great cheer, which takes a long time to die down. So the meal goes on. There is little variety in the food, but there is plenty of it, and that is the important thing where hungry men are concerned. As they eat, all are talking. One carl describes to another how he's just been had by a fellow at Wheaton, who sold him a thrall guaranteed to sound in wind and limb, but the thrall cannot run twice round Jarlulf's Hall without getting the stitch. His new master is vehemently explaining that he intends to get his money back. Another is telling how he has seen a carl's wife and her bondswoman take the ordeal at Hunmanby. The bondwoman has accused her mistress of wrongdoing, and the mistress has challenged her bondswoman to go to the ordeal. So the priest had got ready a bucket of boiling water, at the bottom of which were placed 2 sacred stones. In sight of all, the mistress had plunged her hand and brought up one of the stones, and her arm showed no signs of hurt. Then the bondwoman had attempted the same, but her arm had been frightfully scalded. Thus the innocent had been distinguished from the guilty, and the bondwoman had been taken to the nearest ditch and drowned. Oh dear God. Meanwhile, Ralph, the Viking carls have been pouring into eager ears tales of their adventures among the snow and ice of the seas far in the north. One has a walrus tooth to show, and the others have claws of a huge white beast that can walk on its hind legs and can squeeze a man's body in its arms till every bone is broken. They have the skin of one of these fearsome creatures on board at the river shore, intended by their Viking chief as a present to his brother's wife. A fine bed it will make, but it costs the lives of 3 men to obtain. Would their listeners hear their wonders? There are plenty to tell. In the seas from which they have returned they sailed for 4 days without a night, while the sun went around and round in a great fiery ring. While the merriment is going on, a shamefaced fellow is trying to slink in unobserved at the men's door, but he is greeted with cries of nithing, which is an Old Norse word for villain, and receives a volley of beef bones that first bowls him over and then makes him depart more hurriedly than he came in. Some of Ralph's men follow him, for he has been found guilty of stealing from a comrade on one of the ships. His head will be shaven tomorrow, then dipped in tar and covered with eiderdown, so that he may remember for the future that honourable carls do not steal the belongings of their comrades. Tables are eventually cleared much more quickly than they were filled. Places are now changed. The Jarl and his brother play chess, others play at dice. A wrestling match is soon fixed up, in which combatants are strapped together at the waist and each will try to throw the other. Following this, there is a tug of war across the fire. An ox hide is brought in and an end seized by each of 2 men standing on opposite sides of the hearthstones. Each tries to pull the other into the fire, but they are fairly equally matched, and for some time neither succeeds. Then tempers rise. The shouts of the supporters of each of them urge them on, and one succeeds in pulling the other into the fire. As he is drunk deeply of strong ale, he is not content with his victory, but throws his ox hide over his fallen opponent and then jumps upon him to mark his defeat. When the defeated carl's friends succeeded in pulling him out of the fire, he is naturally somewhat scorched. One of the performers is a juggler. He can perform many tricks, and among them is that of keeping 3 daggers in motion so that one of them is always in hand and the other 2 are always in the air. Further, he offers to show his skill on the following day by stepping from oar to oar on the outside of a ship while it is being rowed. He will step thus from stern to stern and back again, and moreover will keep his 3 daggers moving all the time. The challenge is accepted, and he shall have his choice of presents from Ralph when he has succeeded in doing what he says he will do. Challenges seem to be everywhere during these festivities. Bersi, one of Ralph's carls, challenges Egil, a carl from Ulf, because he finds that whilst he has been away from home, Egil had married the maiden to whom he was betrothed. And Bersi is not at all pleased with the course of events, so he has challenged the other carl for his wife. Tomorrow they will go to a holmgang. The holmgang was a duel fought according to fixed rules on a piece of ground specially marked out for the purpose. In earlier times it was fought on a holm or island, hence the name. And they were going to fight it out, and if Egil is not the victor, he will lose his wife and Bersi will gain one. The excitement caused by Bersi's challenge is dying down, with further excitement arises from the entrance of a carl with news of a strange sight in the sky. It had been a dark, cloudy night, but suddenly the clouds broke up, and there between 2 clouds appeared a star with a long light streaming from it like a tail of fire. It is there for all to see if they don't believe him. So a rush outside for the men's door, and the hall is left deserted, Outside there are groups of wondering men looking upwards at a bright hairy star and asking one another with bated breath what evil fortune to their land this marvellous sight portends. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I think it was an absolute belter. If you did, please subscribe to my channel, Step Through History, where I've got more stories and I'll have plenty more uploaded in the near future. As for the shooting star, well, I mean, it's just a lump of rock floating through space, isn't it? It can't really be a message of the future. Oh, that's just the sound of Alfred the Great dying. But anyway, like I say, it's probably just a shooting star. Well, that's me done. Probably got just enough time in the day to go and play a light game of ball down on Anlafsbyr Common. Wish me luck. Until next time.